The number line, part 2, chapter 1, lesson 1, part 2. So fractions on the number line. A number line can be broken up into smaller pieces than just whole numbers. For example, fractions and decimals. The denominator of a fraction tells us how many spaces the number line must be broken up into between the whole numbers. For example, 1/2. Since the denominator is 2, there must be 2 spaces in between each whole number. So if this number line was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, if we were splitting it up into halves, we would break up each whole number into 2 pieces. This would be 1/2, this would be 1 1/2, this would be 2 1/2, and this would be 3 1/2. So here we have an example where our number line in between 7 and 8 is broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. So that tells you the denominator of each fraction should be a 6. So they just went ahead and labeled 7 1 6, 7 2 6 was labeled, 7 3 6, 7 4 6, 7 5 6. Remember, 7 6 6 what would be technically next, but because 6 6 is equal to 1, that's why this is 8. So now here we have 8 9/10. So we know our numbers are broken up into tenths because our denominator is 10. What would be after 8 9/10 would be 8 10/10. But again, we don't want to have 10/10 because that equals a whole. So 8 plus 1 whole is 9. 9 1/10, 9 2/10, 9 3/10, 9 4/10, 9 5/10, 9 6/10, 9 7/10, and 9 9/10. Here, number 26, we have 10 1/3 as the first value we know. So before it would be 10 0/3, or just plain 10. Then 10 2/3, 11, 11 1/3, 11 2/3, then 12, and 12 1/3. Vertical number lines are no different. They can also be broken up into fractions. Here's an example of where we have a number line from 3 1/3 to 5 1/3 broken up into intervals of thirds. So here we have 2 2/5, 2 3/5, 2 4/5 would then be next. Then 3 1/5, 3 3/5. So this isn't much different than the whole numbers. You're adding a fraction, but you're still going up one fraction at a time. So you are going to be asked to make your own number line with fractions and mixed numbers. They'll give you the parameters. They'll tell you where in between and what interval to draw them. So this example, it said from 7 to 9. So 7 is your whole number, 9 is your whole number at the end, with intervals of 1/5. Remember, because your denominator is 5, it helps you know to break up in between your whole numbers into 5 spaces. And then you just label each. So for number 30, it says between 0 and 2 with intervals of 8. Right away, 1/8, excuse me. Right away, I'm going to label my 1 because that's in the center. Because I'm breaking it up into 8 spaces, I know I need 7 lines. So I like to put stuff in the center when I know there's one in the center. So that would be our fourth. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And forgive this that it looks a little sloppy, but again, I'm not expecting perfection, just that I know you have the general idea. So here you would have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, and so on. And after 1, make sure you put the 1 in front. 1 1/8, 1 1/8, 1 2/8, etc. Number 31, mixed numbers between 11 and 13. So again, it's just important that when you're breaking it up into 6, you start at 11 here, 13. Make sure you know what's in the middle is 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines for 6 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines for 6 spaces. So remember your whole number in front. 11 and 1, 6. 11 and 2, 6. And so on. We can also break number lines down in between decimals. It's not much different than writing whole numbers on. It's just important that we identify the interval and count up from there. So in this example, we have two numbers next to each other, 1.6 and 1.8. So that tells me the interval is 0.2. So that's how they were able to fill in 1.4. 1.8 plus 0.2 is 2. 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, 2.8. So 44, let's look at 6.2 to 6.4. Again, that's another interval of 0.2. Because I need to find the one before it, I would subtract. 6.2 minus 0.2 is just 6. 6.2, 6.4, this would be 6.6. 6.8, 7.0, 7.2, 7.4, and 7.6. Number 45, again, I'm going to find two of the marked ones that are together. I have to have two together to find the interval. 12.1 to 12.5. Well, that's a difference of 0.4. So I start at 9.7 in the beginning. I add 0.4 and I get 10.1. 10.5, then it would be 10.9, 11.3, and then 11.7, 12.1, 12.5, 12.9. So again, the same can be done with vertical number lines as well. I want to find two digits that are next to each other. Here I have 6.5, 6.6. That's an interval of 0.1. So 6.6, 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 7, 7.1. So now that we know how to make a decimal and a fraction number line, we can use that to compare fractions and decimals. We would just draw two number lines, one on top of each other. So this is a number line where we're comparing 0.86 and 4/10. So they drew the fraction one first. That would be your choice. They labeled 4/10. And then they did a decimal one split up into tenths and approximated where 0.86 would be, just a little over halfway between 0.8 and 0.9, and put it there. So since 0.86 is so much further to the left than 4/10, we know that 4/10 is less than 0.6. So we can do the same here to compare 7/10 and 0.52. They're kind enough to already draw our number lines for us. The first one is the fraction, so I'm locating 7/10 and labeling it. And 0.52 lies between 0.5 and 0.6. 0.52 I know is going to be closer here than to 0.6. So I could easily say, just by looking at this, that 7/10 is greater than 0.52. And that's it for lesson 1.1 part 2.